Hello, I'm David Sunfellow, President and founder of New Heaven, New Earth, a small nonprofit organization located in Sedona, Arizona. This video is part 2 of a 2-part series on how near-death experiences are changing the world. Since part 1 lays the foundation for this video, I urge all viewers to watch part 1 before watching part 2. Part 1 discusses the history of near-death experiences, how many people are reporting them worldwide, and what their chief characteristics are. Part 1 also includes 7 people describing their life-changing, paradigm-shifting experiences. Part 2 begins with Mellen-Thomas Benedict, sharing what near-death researcher Kenneth Ring says is one of the most remarkable near-death experiences he has ever encountered. The following excerpt comes from Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie.
Journey through the light and back, Mellen-Thomas Benedict's incredible story of his near-death experience. In 1982, Mellen-Thomas died of terminal brain cancer. Mellen is one of the most studied near-death cases in the world. He has taken part in more research, think tanks, than any other near-deather. Since his near-death experience, Mellen-Thomas has devoted himself to scientific research projects.
Back in late 1981, I was diagnosed with a terminal brain cancer. It was inoperable and incurable at the time, and I was given 6 to 8 months to live. And I was someone who was completely unprepared for this. I had, in many ways, I had no spiritual foundation. I didn't even believe in God. I wasn't even an atheist. I wasn't even interested in that sort of thing. And certainly had lived a life of being very self-centered and was completely, caught off guard. And there are other people that know how this feeling is. Why me? And, of course, I blamed everyone in the universe, including God, which I didn't believe in. Blamed everyone for this. But the truth is that I know now from my experience that how I developed the cancer, and it was because I was someone who really believed the world was going to end in my time. I really believed that human beings were a cancer on Earth and that we were going to overgraze or explode the world or completely pollute it. And I really didn't believe in my heart of hearts that the world was going to last past my lifetime. And it was that thought deep in my heart that I got to see in my life review, that humans are a cancer on the planet, that nature had gone wrong and created a cancer called a human being. And because I thought humans were cancers, I developed that brain cancer. And so I always tell people, be careful of your self-fulfilling prophecies or your worldview. It affects you more than it affects anything else. A review of my life began ticking away from the moment of my death all the way back to even before my birth, even into prenatal. As my life ticked away and all around me, scenes of my life were very vivid. I could feel things. I could see things from both sides. I could see all the good things I'd done and all the things that I'd done out of just ignorance. And I could also see that I had built a wall around me that wouldn't let love in. I realized at that moment I had never known what love was, and I could see all the people that had tried to love me, and it didn't get through to me. And so the life review was pretty terrible the farther back I went. And then suddenly my life review was over, and I was lost and in my soul crying for help. What do I do now? What do I do now? Is this the way it ends? And literally an angel appeared to me, and I didn't believe in angels. I thought they were figurines. And this golden angel actually appeared. Like the feeling was, I'm like your guardian angel. And
which you never knew existed when you were living.
Or even believed in.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. I thought all those were myths. And with the help of this angel, I was taken to what we call the light. And I go back to the light every day, or at will, if I need to, for doing consultations or inventions and things like that. And I've been tested. I can invent on command. I call it the great light. It's the great self. There's only one of us, actually, in this world and in this universe, and it is the great self. It is the sum total of all of us and everything that's ever been. I asked, why are humans so dark and evil? And the light turned into a mandala, if you know what that is, or like one of those big round cathedral windows.
Right.
It turned into a mandala of human souls, and I was taken into it. And I was allowed, it seemed like, to look into every human soul, including my own. And I tell you, I saw no evil whatsoever. With my gift of access to the light, I always wanted to bring back things that were tangible, testable, and so that's what I've become very good at. And we're just now releasing a series of products and to the public. And we chose to, although I've done a lot of medical work, we chose to go into the wellness and spa industry first, because honestly, that's where most of the healing's going on right now. It's in wellness centers and spas, and chiropractic offices. Is where most of the healing's going on. There's not a lot of healing going on in hospitals, and I'm not putting anybody down or anything, but I think we know that's the truth. And I was talked into getting tested again by the same doctors. And I remember the doctor coming in and putting up the second scan, and he said, well, this is very interesting. And I said, what is it? And he says, well, there's no trace now. And I said, it's a miracle. He said, no, we call these spontaneous remissions. And I said, well, what is that? And he said, well, we really don't understand, but there's a lot of evidence. In fact, he said, in medical records, there's every known human condition has had a spontaneous remission, from adults growing new teeth to incurable diseases disappearing to MS to blind people seeing again. And they can't explain it. They think it has something to do with the immune system, blah, blah. But as he was, because he showed the scan and he said, you see here's the cancer. And had we irradiated or operated, you would always have a lesion. This would always be noticeable in every scan the rest of your life. He said, look here, there's nothing.
It was just gone.
Yeah, this is just one of those cases where it was a complete spontaneous remission. And I said, I thought at that moment, what is the physics of this? Because if it really happens in flesh, there is a physics to it that we need to understand.
I agree.
And if this happens in every known condition, then I want to spend the rest of my life studying. Which I've seen miracles, I've seen miracle workers, and the inconsistency of that. And my idea was, even if you're a greatest healer in the world, how many people can you see a day? And that most people in the world will never take spirulina. Most people will not meet the Pope. Most people will never ever meet the Dalai Lama. So what about the rest of us? You know.
What's the biggest lesson for those of us right now on this planet, living, breathing, who are mired in everything that's been going on over the past so many years? What would you tell us all?
That creation has just begun, and the future is so bright. Believe it, the future is so bright for humanity, and we can get into the details later.
Yeah.
But what I learned is that we've already made it. We just haven't realized it. We've already made it. And not only is our survival and future possible, it's inevitable. If I'm on any mission, it's to create heaven on earth.
Well, you're getting there. Now, are there other people like you out there doing the same thing? Is this almost like an army of people that have died and have come back?
Well, in one of my visits with the light, I was told that the near-death experience, and this is, way back then, I was told that the near-death experience would become more and more popular, and it would have an effect on the entire world when a critical mass was hit where all these people have died and come back. And are telling you that it's, there's a lot more going on than what we think. It's getting over the fear of death is one of the first phases of self-initiation, because once you get over the fear of death and realize that you have been alive forever already, and you will be alive forever no matter what, in fact, no one can manipulate you. The old fears don't manipulate you anymore. Right. Well, there is not going to be an end times, and that's why this is all going to end within the next couple of generations. We're going to actually transform. This is why the near-death experience is really big on helping us transform. And we're going to transform over the next 75 to 100 years into completely different creatures than we know now.
Is it going to be gradual, or?
Well, it's been gradual. In fact, the amazing thing that I was shown is that We're technically there now. We're at a time that's never happened before in history. We're technically at a time in history where we can transcend survival en masse. We can technically clothe, comfort, feed, and educate every human on Earth right now. And this has never happened before, and it will continue to grow. And so we're in a most beautiful time, actually. Although there's still a lot of all kinds of people trying to manipulate us, but that's been from day one. The Earth will die, though. The sun will die, and the Earth will die eventually. And we have about another good 10,000 years on Earth. But in the next 400 years, we will begin star-seeding other planets. We're like the little birds that can't stay in the nest forever. Our manifest destiny is to take life with us into the stars.
Along with being miraculously healed of terminal brain cancer and coming back with many unusually profound insights as to the nature of reality and purpose of life, Mellen-Thomas Benedict also has the distinction of turning inner inspirations into real-world inventions. In the interview we just heard, Benedict described the Holy Grail he's after. In essence, he wants to bend the laws of this world with the machines he's creating so others can be healed as he was. Is this really possible? We'll take a closer look at this idea in a moment. If you'd like to learn more about Benedict, his near-death experience, and the innovative projects he's working on, here's where to go. This page also includes the complete, unedited, almost 2-hour-long interview that George Norrie did with Benedict. If there's one near-death experience I hope everyone who watches this presentation will learn more about, this is it. Before we move on, I want to share 5 quotes from Benedict that illuminate some of the most bewildering aspects of NDEs. Concerning the kind of spiritual figures the people encounter when they pass over, here's what Benedict discovered. Quote, "The light kept changing into different figures, like Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, mandalas, archetypal images, and signs. I asked the light, 'What is going on here? Please, light, clarify yourself for me.' The light responded, 'The information transferred to me was that during your life-after-death experience, your beliefs shape the kind of feedback you're getting before the light. If you are a Buddhist or Catholic or fundamentalist, you get a feedback loop of your own stuff. You have a chance to look at it and examine it, but most people do not. As the light revealed itself to me, I became aware that what I was really seeing was our higher self matrix." Unquote. What really leapt out at me in this paragraph was you have a chance to look at it and examine it, but most people do not. Here's what Benedict had to say about heaven. Quote, "One of my questions to the light was, 'What is heaven?' I was given a tour of all the heavens that have been created, the nirvanas, the happy hunting grounds, all of them. I went through them. These are thought-formed creations that we have created. I saw the Christian heaven. We expect it to be a beautiful place, and you stand in front of the throne worshiping forever. I tried it. It is boring. It is childlike. Some heavens are very interesting, and some are very boring. I found the ancient ones to be more interesting, like the Native American ones, the happy hunting grounds. The Egyptians have fantastic ones. It goes on and on. There are so many of them. In each of them there is a fractal that is your particular interpretation, unless you are part of the group soul that believes in only the God of a particular religion. Then you are very close, in the same ballpark together. But even then, each is a little bit different." What about hell? Benedict says this, quote, "During my near-death experience, I had a descent into what you might call hell, and it was very surprising. I did not see Satan or evil. My descent into hell was a descent into each person's customized human misery, ignorance, and darkness of not knowing. It seemed like a miserable eternity, but each of the millions of souls around me had a little star of light always available, but no one seemed to pay attention to it. They were so consumed with their own grief, trauma, and misery. But after what seemed an eternity, I started calling out to the light, like a child calling to a parent for help. Then the light opened up and formed a tunnel that came right to me and insulated me from all that fear and pain." Unquote. Notice how Benedict says that each soul had a little star of light always available, but no one seemed to pay attention to it. Why? Because they were so consumed with their own grief, trauma, and misery. No doubt everyone who hears this can relate to it. How many times have you and I felt this way in this world, consumed with our own misery, when help was available if we could set ourselves aside long enough to look up and ask for it? In his famous book, Return from Tomorrow, George Ritchie describes a scene he encountered on the other side where souls were being tormented by all kinds of afflictions. Floating above them were legions of angels, ready to help anyone who looked up. But again, few did. The same themes are echoed by Howard Storm and others who have had hellish or distressing NDEs. God, light, help came when distressed souls reached out. The next two quotes I want to share with you deal with what I believe is one of the most grievously misunderstood aspects of life and the spiritual path. Here Benedict really shines as he turns the tables on spiritual traditions all over the world that have taught for eons that the purpose of life is to leave this world, wake up, or become God. What Benedict learned after visiting endless heavens and hells and eventually returning to the void, as he calls it, the primal source of everything, was that the created universe is where the action is. We're here and keep being sent back because our souls desire to experience the thrills, joys, and challenges of creation. First quote, God gave everything to us. Everything is here. This is where it's at. And what we are into now is God's exploration of God through us. People are so busy trying to become God that they ought to realize that we are already God and God is becoming us. That's what it's really about. When I realized this, I was finished with the void and wanted to return to this creation. Second quote, the other side is not all it's cracked up to be. There's a lot you can't do on the other side. There's a perfect combination, though. A body without spirit is a wasteland, and a spirit without a body is a wasteland. And we are the perfect matrix of body and spirit. With body and spirit, you can have it all. The last quote from Benedict concerns what he would do now if he ever got sick again. Quote, if something ever happened to me again, I would give faith healers and healers the first chance. I would give a miracle the first chance. If someone was all wired up and everything, I would bring a whole bunch of healers in the room, some manifestors, and let them have a go at it. I traveled the world studying these things, and I've seen people healed of the most amazing things by holy water, holy places, holy men, holy women, and holy moly. I would give a miracle the first chance. The universe is one giant miracle, and you are part of that. In this quote, Benedict opens the door to what I believe is one of the most compelling aspects of near-death experiences. Many people who have these experiences report dramatic healings. In Benedict's case, he was healed of brain cancer. Another woman, whom you'll be learning more about shortly, was completely healed of Hodgkin's lymphoma. Her healing occurred after 4 years of wasting away, to the point where her body was full of lemon-sized tumors. There are many stories like this, supported by medical records and bewildered doctors who can't explain what happened. What happened is this. People who have near-death experiences universally report that this world, when seen from the other side, is clearly a dream-like reality. It's not real. While there is some kind of mechanism that makes us believe it is real while we are living in it, there are ways the laws of this world can be, and often are, changed, altered, suspended. Let's listen now as Nancy Dannison and Jim McCartney describe the dreamlike nature of this world.
And I realized the instant I thought, you're supposed to go through a tunnel, I was in a tunnel. And I kind of realized I had created that tunnel just by thinking it. So I'm saying to myself, I'm going to do an experiment. I'm going to think of some other expression. Like, I've heard the afterlife is like this beautiful meadow. I'm in this beautiful meadow. And I mean, it's a real meadow. Have you ever seen the movie Robin Williams, What Dreams May Come? It was like that, except it wasn't paint. It was a real beautiful sky, birds singing, there were mountains in the distance, there was a purple haze over them, the sun was shining. It was gorgeous. But I knew I was in the light. I wasn't in that meadow. So I thought, I created this meadow just by thinking it's supposed to be a meadow. One more experiment. I'm going to assume that I've just hallucinated all this, and I'm back in my body, and I'm on my way over to the James. I was in the University Hospital's radiology department, and they had to walk me over to the James for surgery. So I figure I'm on my way over to the James, and everything's fine, and none of this happened. I'm in the hallway, walking up from the radiology department over to the James. I'm walking with my Johnny on, with his wire sticking out, which I don't think they would really let you do. There was a nurse beside me. I could feel her presence. I could smell her perfume. I could smell that hospital smell, that you can't get away from if you're in a hospital. I could feel the floor under my feet. I could see this orange or purple stripe running down the wall, like this way to surgery. It was absolutely real. It was as real as any of this that's going on now. I had absolutely no doubt that was Earth, that was physical reality. Except that I knew it wasn't. And I realized that's the difference between what we experience when we're in the body on Earth and what's real. The difference is you're not fooled by it. And I realized I wasn't fooled by these manifestations. And that word came into my mind, manifestations. And I got this huge download of information about what manifesting is, that we manifest physical reality all the time, every second of our existence. And that when we're in the light, we know we're doing it, so we're not fooled by it. When we're in the body, we don't know that we're doing it, and so it fools us, and we believe it is real. One of the things that particularly stood out in my mind was the fact that I hadn't seen any angels. I hadn't seen my parents. Well, one of my parents had been dead for a number of years at this point. I had a dead sister. I had dead grandparents. Didn't see any of them. So, and I didn't expect it to. I didn't see any angels. I didn't see Jesus. I didn't see God. I didn't. It wasn't like, what I had read about. And I was in Catholic school for 12 years, and then I went to Methodist college for 4 years, and then I studied Judaism because I was going to convert. And I had been reading, Buddhism and Taoism, and I had a lot of exposure to religions, and I'd taken comparative religions in college, and it wasn't like anything that I'd read. And then I would switch perspectives and be out here at a greater perspective, while at the same time still feeling like I was at this perspective. And I went out and out and out, and each time I got farther and farther out in perspective, the more ridiculous the perspective below it seemed to me. Ridiculous, but in kind of a cute way, like when you watch a baby and you know that they're falling down or they're goofing around, whatever, you think it's really cute even though that's not really the way you walk, or you realize that they're inept, but you love them for the ineptness. That's what I was doing when I was having these multiple simultaneous layers of awareness. I was getting a broader and broader and broader perspective on myself and on my life and on everything. When I look back on human life, it was like reading a comic book in comparison. It was not real. And I was flabbergasted by how unreal human life is, how I could possibly have ever thought that I was a human being, and that was life. I mean, I could not get over what kind of mechanism it must have taken to convince me that human life was real, when I knew darn well it wasn't, now that I'm in the light and I've got all this access to all this information and I saw, the truths of the universe.
And metaphorically, I turned around and looked at this world again. I saw the world that I had momentarily left. And it looked like so much paper mache. It looked like two-dimensional fluff. That this was the illusion, and it was all contained within this infinite presence. Reality, there is no separation. But in the illusion we've created here in this phenomenal world that we play in, requires it. It's not that it's paper mache and less than, it's just that it's required to be at this level for us to experience this level of life. The effects of this experience was recognizing that who I am is the universe in form. And it's done a couple of things. One is shake my own sense of self from this egoic physical structure that's trying to survive the best it knows how through, a dangerous world, to seeing this incredible matrix and dance of life that this body is part of, and yet that dance of all of life is part of me as well. There's no separation. One of the outcomes of that is that my deep desire is to help others, to serve. This is a very, very common element you see in people going through extreme trauma or near-death experiences, is that they pop out the other side and say, wow, let's go play, let's go help. It's not about my bank account or the size of my house. It's about all of us waking up to more than what we see on the planet right now.
There are many reasons why near-death experiences have captured our imagination. Encounters with God, Jesus, Buddha, angelic beings, beings of light, deceased family and friends are beautiful and inspiring. These kinds of experiences stir primal knowings and yearnings. They awaken in us a sense of hope. Hope that there is more to life and death than suffering, that there is more to us and those we love than the mortal bodies we occupy and the fragile world in which we live. What's equally mesmerizing is the fact that almost everyone who reports these experiences are dramatically transformed by them. Here's a partial list of the life-changing after effects that Dr. Jeffrey Long has identified in his book, Evidence of the Afterlife. People who have had near-death experiences often report a decreased fear of death, increased belief in the afterlife, a stronger sense of spirituality, a sense of God's presence, an awareness of the meaning and purpose of life, a belief in the sacredness of life, a greater appreciation of life, a reduced interest in material gain or status. They often seek out helping and healing professions. 45% report psychic, paranormal, and other special gifts. NDEers with serious illnesses, both physical and mental, often report they were healed. They feel increasingly loving and accepting of themselves, demonstrate more self-confidence, have increased awareness of the needs of others and a willingness to reach out to them. They may end negative and unloving relationships and seek out positive and loving ones instead. Increasing capacities for love and compassion can result in stronger marriages and relationships, and many report increased intelligence. You can find a handout of the NDE after effects that Dr. Long has identified in the footnotes that accompany this video. In part 1 of this presentation, I mentioned how Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life, which was first published in 1975, popularized the near-death experience and launched today's near-death experience movement. While we know a lot more today than we did 37 years ago, many questions remain. Why do some people have hellish or distressing experiences, and what can be done to deal with these exceptionally traumatic events? As we heard earlier, some near-death experiencers suggest the reason the imagery in NDEs varies so widely from person to person, culture to culture, and from one religious tradition to another is that these experiences are created by the people and groups of people who have them. How can this insight be confirmed or refuted, and what can we learn from it? If it turns out that we are actually creating these experiences ourselves, can we and should we learn to control them? Are some experiences more desirable than others? Many near-death experiencers return with specific predictions. Some come true, many do not. Why do these predictions and their accuracy vary so widely? Is there a way to determine which predictions to take seriously and which to ignore? If this world is a dream, as so many near-death experiencers report, how can we put this understanding to work for us? Can illnesses of all kinds, physical, mental, and emotional, be eradicated? Can global issues like climate change be slowed down, reversed, and healed using inner techniques? Some NDE researchers indicate that as many as 21% of the people who have near-death experiences attempt suicide within 15 years of their experience. These people are traumatized by the harshness of this world and long to re-experience the love and light they encountered on the other side. In my mind, this is an indication of how seriously these experiences can be misunderstood and misapplied. Spiritual bypassing is another serious problem. While on the other side people realize the world is a dream and experience themselves to be God, or if not God himself, then an exalted spiritual being. When they return to this world, they mistakenly believe that because the world is a dream, they don't need to take it seriously. Or alternately, because they know they are God, or some portion of God, they falsely believe that they no longer need to develop the human part of their nature. A correlation can be found with so-called Eastern masters who have classic enlightenment experiences. After experiencing themselves to be God, they declare and act as if they are perfect, but eventually, because they've neglected to work on shadow issues and failed to develop the human side of themselves, they end up in moral, financial, and sexual scandals. While we now know that near-death experiences are not created by dying brains, or any other brain-based malfunction, there are still many questions concerning how the brain interfaces with the mind and soul. How is it possible, for example, for elements of the near-death experience to be triggered and reproduced by stimulating the brain with electrical charges? Do animals experience an afterlife? And if so, how do they compare to human experiences? Do primates, dolphins, and other highly developed animals have the same kind of complex near-death experiences that humans do? And then there's this question. Are near-death experiences evolving as we are? Some researchers have suggested that people who are born and raised in Stone Age tribal cultures may not experience life reviews. Is this true? Does our level of development as people and individuals determine the depth and breadth of the afterlife experiences we have? And if so, what kind of new afterlife experiences are waiting for us in the future? Which brings us back to Raymond Moody. After having put near-death experiences on the map, he's now exploring another kind of experience that moves the whole discussion to a new level. Let's listen now as Raymond Moody describes his pioneering work with shared death experiences.
For a long time we've known that people who almost die in return have these extraordinary experiences. But it's now becoming quite obvious that this experience is also very common among those who are standing at the bedside of a dying loved one. That is, it's quite common that when a loved one dies, the people standing around will say that they seem to leave their bodies. They seem to accompany the dying person partway into another realm.
And these are people who are not near death. They're perfectly well.
Absolutely. They're just standing there accompanying at the bedside someone who is dying. And all of the effects that we hear from near-death experiences are also present in the shared death experiences. People say that they become aware of a beautiful light. A very common feature is that they tell us that that they see the relatives of the deceased person coming to meet them and to take them away.
Right.
Another very common feature of this is that people will tell us that they actually see the spirit of the person who is dying stand up or rise up from the body that's just deceased. Very often this takes the form of a misty a globe, sometimes a globe of golden light. Sometimes it's described more as a grayish cloud, and that this just rises up and typically passes through the ceiling. In quite a number of cases, however, this is described as having more of a form. People will say that as though they were a transparent replica of the person who is dying, just sort of sits up or stands up out of the body and goes away.
Now, do they have other parts of the experience as well? Do they go up a tunnel with the person who's dying?
You know, I can't recall offhand people talking of a tunnel, although I can think of cases of where people say that there's a passageway of some sort, that they seem to go across at least part way with the person who is dying. And most extraordinarily of all, Paul, I have a number of cases in which the bystander actually co-participated in the panoramic life review of the person who passed away. Including most remarkably an elderly woman I talked with some years ago who had been very attached to her husband because they had had one of those 30 or 40 or 50-year marriages, a real long marriage. They had been friends since childhood.
Those real rare things.
That's right. And as he died, she said that his entire life was around them in a panorama. And she saw the parts that she was involved in, but also she saw aspects of his life that she had not known about before. And I've heard that same story from numerous other people. Now, the implication of this, if you think about it, is that this really does throw a monkey wrench in the traditional way of debating about near-death experiences.
Right.
Because what the physiologists tell us, who say that these experiences are hallucinatory, is that as the person is dying, the oxygen supply to their brain is lowered, and hence they have these hallucinatory effects. But if that's true, why would the bystanders have the same kind of experience?
Sure. Well, why would they?
That's very difficult to explain.
Yeah.
And I think that once these findings come out and are thoroughly understood by the public, we're going to be into an entirely new dimension of discussing near-death experiences, because that old standby that, oh, this is just hallucinations caused by brain damage, that's out the window with these empathic death experiences. In 1994, when my mother was dying, my wife and I and my sisters and one of my brother-in-laws were there, and all had astonishing experiences at the moment my mother died.
I think it's one of the most exciting fields to study.
Oh, yes, Paul.
In the study of afterlife studies, I think this is one of the most exciting
Paul,
areas
this
to look at.
is the new frontier of knowledge, because now we have not only this awareness that these near-death experiences are not confined to the people who almost die, but kind of leak out by whatever unknown means to the people standing around.
Yeah.
For more information about Raymond Moody, including his new book on shared death experiences called Glimpses of Eternity, you can visit his website. So how are near-death experiences changing the world? A growing number of people from all over the world are reporting near-death experiences and related phenomenon. These experiences are dramatically changing the lives of those who experience them. These experiences are also changing the lives of people who hear about them and or meet experiencers, especially family and friends. NDE experiences are finally being taken seriously by the culture at large, including the medical establishment and mainstream media, which in turn is encouraging more and more NDEers to come forward and share their stories. Major truths concerning the nature of reality and the purpose of life, which have massive implications for all aspects of human society, are becoming embedded in our collective consciousness. And finally, some people suggest that new paradigms begin to replace old ones when somewhere between 5 and 10% of the population adopts a new way of thinking and living, with at least 5 to 10% of today's global population reporting near-death experiences. It appears very likely that the core truths, values, and perspectives imparted by NDEs are laying the foundation for a radical restructuring of our world. In preparing for this talk, I created a list of what I consider to be the main truths imparted by near-death experiences. Since there's not enough time to go through the entire list item by item, I want to focus on 2 truths that I think can have the most impact on our lives if we practice them. Here's NDE researcher Kenneth Ring discussing number 10 on my list, why it is important to view and treat one another as ourselves.
I think this is one of the most remarkable aspects of a near-death experience, and it's one that's not really given the amount of attention that it should. Obviously, many people know about the light, they know about the out-of-body experience, but the thing that really is, I think, important about the near-death experience, and in regard to the life review phenomenon, is it isn't just a life review. It's a reliving of your life. And when people describe this, it's not always done in this way, but when people describe the full experience, it's every single act that you have done, every single thought that you have thought, every single word that you have spoken. Suddenly, all of this is back with you. You are running through it again, and as you say, you see and you experience the effects of these acts, these thoughts, and these words on other people. Let me just give you one brief example to illustrate this. I have a friend who, when growing up, was kind of a roughneck. He had a hot temper, and he was always getting into scrapes. And one day, he was driving in his truck through the suburb in the town where he lived, and he almost hit a pedestrian. And he got very aggravated at this pedestrian, and he was a very big physical guy, still is. And a fight ensued, and he punched this guy out and left him unconscious on the pavement, got back into his truck and roared off. 15 years later, this guy has a near-death experience. Oddly enough, it was caused by an accident in regard to his own truck at that time. But in any event, he has a near-death experience, and during the near-death experience, he has a life review. And in his life review, this particular scene of the fight takes place again, comes up in his life review. And he said that, as many people do, he kind of experienced this from a dual aspect. There was a part of him that was almost as if he were high up in a building, looking through a window and seeing the fight below. But at the same time he was observing the fight like a spectator, he found himself in the fight, except this time he found himself in the role of the other person. And he felt all 32 blows that he had rained on this person originally 15 years ago now being inflicted upon himself. He felt his teeth cracking, he felt the blood in his teeth, he felt everything that this other person must have felt at that particular time. It was a complete role reversal, an empathic life review experience. And this is the sort of thing that many people report. And when they report these kinds of experiences, they realize that in our life, we are the very people that we hurt, we are the very people that we help to feel good. And we experience these actions as though done to ourselves in the life review. So that when people start talking about the golden rule in the context of the near-death experience, the golden rule is not just a precept for moral conduct, it's the way it works. And you experience this during the life review. And you learn that lesson in a very forcible way as a result of going through this kind of experience. And that's why when people have NDEs, they change as much as they do. Because if you can even imagine what it must be like to go through your entire life and see everything that you've ever done without judgment, but from a kind of almost omniscient point of view with regard to the effects of those actions, and see what your actions do to other people, it's a heavy kind of lesson, and it's something that stays with you, and it informs your conduct for the time after your near-death experience. So it does give us a lot to think about, and that's why I say in my book, Lessons from the Light, the near-death experience isn't given just to those who have the experience, it's given to all of us to learn from, because all of us can profit by the lessons that near-death experiences learn in the course of the life review or other aspects of their experience, and we can grow from these lessons, and we can apply these lessons into our daily life.
The second NDE takeaway that I'd like to share with you is number 17. We can experience many of the positive, life-deepening things that NDEers report by studying NDEs and putting into practice the core truths these experiences have to teach us. As Kenneth Ring notes in Lessons from the Light, quote, merely learning about the near-death experience has effects similar to those reported by NDEers, unquote. A link to all 17 of my NDE takeaways is included in the footnotes that accompany this video. I first heard about near-death experiences over 3 decades ago when I attended a lecture by Dr. George Ritchie in which he described his remarkable experience. This presentation represents the main things I've learned in the years since. The next step in my journey includes moving away from talking about these experiences to finding practical ways to put them to work in our lives. Specifically, I'm offering 4 classes in Sedona. The first 2 will explore Anita Moorjani's near-death experience, while the second 2 will involve me sharing a formula that incorporates NDE insights into a day-to-day spiritual practice. If you would like to know more about these classes and future events, you can join the mailing list on NHNE's NDE website. For those of you who are interested in learning more about Anita Moorjani, here is an introduction to her dramatic experience.
This is the story of someone who has had a near-death experience, but with this major twist. In comparison, I could almost say this is not just a mere near-death experience, as if any near-death experience was a mere. This is something that we not only can learn about the afterlife with, but we can learn about ourselves and really what life is all about from this story. So we're going to begin by asking you, Anita, if you could just sort of tell us where this story starts. I think it starts with you being sick.
The story starts from me being diagnosed with cancer and it getting progressively worse. And in the beginning, I actually refused conventional treatment because I had watched 2 people close to me die on chemotherapy. And over a period of 4 years, the cancer had spread throughout my body. I had lymphoma.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, it spread from, in fact, all the way from the base of my skull all the way down to my abdomen, like through my chest, under my arms. Originally, when I was diagnosed, it was because I just had a lump over here and just where my collarbone is. But over a period of 4 years, it spread until my organs shut down. And then I went into a coma, and that's when the near-death experience started. It was at this point that I sensed both my father and my best friend communicating to me, now that you know the truth of who you really are, go back and live your life fearlessly. And they were really surprised that I was waking up and coming out of the coma, and very happy. My husband was like really pleased. He was almost like dancing on the spot.
All this comes together exactly as you expected it to be. You healed miraculously quickly. I mean, right?
Very, very quickly. In fact, that was the other thing that I could see. I realized that when I was on the other side, in the other realm, and I realized that my body would reflect this very quickly. And I knew that it would not be months or, it would be more like days or even just a couple of weeks at the most. I knew that I would be feeling a lot better. And that's exactly what happened. Within 4 days, the tumors had reduced by about 60%, 60 or 70%. And within 2 or 3 weeks, when they were conducting tests, they couldn't even find the cancer. They did a lymph node biopsy, and the radiologist had to mark a lymph node in my body to biopsy, and he couldn't even find a lymph node that was big enough to even suggest cancer.
When just days prior, they were the size of lemons.
Exactly, and he had those original scans on the light box, and then he was using the ultrasound to try and find a lymph node, and he was getting really confused because he was saying, I just can't find anything. And here were these scans showing that my body was ridden with tumors.
For more information about Anita Moorjani, including links to her new book, her website, her Facebook page, additional videos, and important interviews and background information, go here. As I've mentioned, there are a series of handouts that accompany this presentation. You can find links to these handouts in the footnotes that appear below this video. If you or someone you know has had a near-death experience or other kind of spiritually transformative experience and need help understanding and integrating it, the American Center for the Integration of Spiritually Transformative Experiences may be able to help. If you or someone you know has had a distressing or hellish near-death experience, I encourage you to check out the work of Nancy Bush. She has a website and new book that deals with this important topic. If you're interested in meeting people who have had near-death experiences or learning more about this topic, NHNE maintains 3 social networks that are dedicated to this purpose. Our primary social network currently has 291 members, 90 of whom have had NDEs. We also maintain pages on Facebook and Google+. You may also be interested in visiting our NDE Stories website, which is collecting the most inspiring near-death experiences and related phenomena we come across. You can find links to other important NDE organizations, such as the International Association for Near-Death Studies and Near-Death Experiences and the Afterlife, included in the footnotes below. Finally, if you found this 2-part video helpful, please consider making a tax-deductible donation to New Heaven, New Earth. Your contribution will help us continue to explore vital topics like the one featured in this presentation. Thank you for watching.